Ahead of a weekend featuring 4 top 10 matchups, positional top 10 watch lists are coming out, and oh boy, you better believe there are snubs.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We are your hosts. That guy that I'm pointing to right over there is Andy Patton. My name is Isaac Shade, and we are elated, yes, elated to be with you on this Friday as we get ready for a massive weekend of college basketball. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hey, I want to say a big welcome in, especially to you everydayers. We're so glad you're with us. If you're not already part of our Locked On College Basketball Discord community, we'd love to have you come and be part of that as well. It's free, and the link for it is in the show notes. All right. The majority of the show is getting you ready for this massive slate that we have this weekend. But Andy, before we get to that, pretty cool. We have started to get out the awards for the 5 different positions. We had the preseason list with lots of dudes on each one. And now Hoops Hall has narrowed it down to a top 10 for each. So we have the Bob Cousy Award for point guards, Jerry West for shooting guards, Julius Erving for small forwards, Karl Malone for power forwards, and the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award for the centers, which, by the way, is not out yet. So what we're going to do is give you the top 10 that are on each, and we just want to give you some people who we think have been snubbed. However, let me just say for the record that people can move on to and off of these lists still, so it's not set in stone. But, Andy, it's still fun to get heated over it, right? Because that's what this is all about. So, Mr. Patton, why don't you start us off with the Bob Cousy Award top 10?
Yeah, so here's the list of the top 10 point guards, and we can talk about a few guys that we think the point guard position feels like a really deep one, and a lot of guys who definitely could have been on this list, should have been on this list. Yeah, it's a tough one, but the guys who are on the list right now, literally from A to Z alphabetically: Max Asmus from Texas, Boo Buie at Northwestern, DeJuan Harris at Kansas, Tyler Kolek from Marquette, Tristan Newton from UConn, another one out of the Big East. Just in UConn, not quite. Javon Quinterly from Memphis, Jamal Shedd at Houston, Isaiah Stevens at Colorado State, Wade Taylor IV at Texas A&M, and like I said, A to Z, Zakai Ziegler from Tennessee, rounding it out. And Isaac, there's a handful of names that very immediately jump out to me, and when this list first came out, I thought, oh, those guys will probably end up being on the Jerry West list, because sometimes guys are slightly out of position, but they didn't. And 2 guys in particular really stand out to me of like, why the heck did they not make this list?
Yeah, I'm right with you, Andy. We talked about this beforehand, and these 2 guys are Mark Sears from Alabama and Braden Smith from Purdue. Andy, let me start with Braden Smith, because I love this story. Coming off of a year when he and Fletcher Loyer were much maligned for, not being able to keep up with Zach Edey, quite frankly, but that's what you expect from an all-freshman backcourt, and that really hurt them in the loss to FDU in the NCAA tournament. But my dude, Braden Smith on a game-by-game basis is putting up near triple-double kind of numbers and is absolutely a massive part of what's making Purdue a more legit and stable option this year. Braden Smith should be on this list.
100%. He's the point guard for the best team in college basketball. You Purdue or UConn, you can make those arguments, but Newton's on the list. And
Christian UConn, yeah, he's on there.
That's right. Mark Sears is the other one to me, like you said, and it's really kind of baffling to me. I think there are a handful of very good players on not so good teams who did not make these lists. And we kind of went through some of the potential snub options, and we're like, yeah, I can understand why, like, Eric Dixon, didn't make it because Villanova's not very good, or Malik Reneau, guys like that for other positions. But Alabama's really good. They were one of the last undefeated Power 6 teams. They're playing phenomenal basketball in the SEC. And outside of that, Mark Sears is averaging 20. There are guys who are averaging 20 for bad teams who made the list. Jalen Tyson stands out to me as one of those examples. So for Mark Sears to not be on either list, and you could debate whether he or Aaron Estrada is the point guard, they're both averaging literally the exact same number of assists and turnovers this year. So they're kind of in that same realm. But to me, Mark Sears is the Alabama point guard. They're one of the top 25 teams in the country, one of the best teams in the SEC. He's averaging 20. He's shooting 44% from three. I don't see how he's not on this list.
Yeah. He should be. Andy, let's move on to the Jerry West Award for the top shooting guard. Here are the 10. Again, as you said, in alphabetical order. This one's only A to W, so that makes me thirsty for root beer. Let's go to Creighton. Trey Alexander. So glad this dude came back to college basketball. Andy, I love watching him play. LJ Cryer, Houston. John L. Davis, FAU. RJ Davis from North Carolina. Boogie Ellis is the only person keeping he and Caleb Love apart on this list. RJ Davis, Boogie Ellis from USC, Caleb Love at Arizona, Kevin McCullough from Kansas, Antonio Reeves from Kentucky, Tyson Walker, Michigan State, and that freshman dude, Jacoby Walter from Baylor. Andy, this is a great list, but we came together and picked out 2 snubs for this one as well.
Yeah, Devin Carter from Providence really stood out to me. The other one's KJ Simpson at Colorado, another potential Pac-12 guy to get on the list. Carter is, I mean, I know Providence hasn't been very good. I know we just talked about that being part of the issue, but especially since Bryce Hopkins went out with that injury. I mean, Carter's averaging 18 points. He's averaging 8.5 rebounds. He's leading the team in basically every category: points, rebounds, assists, steals. I think he's second on the team in blocks. He had that monster performance against Georgetown. Like, to me, Devin Carter is one of the 10 best shooting guards in college basketball. I think you look at this list and, you know, I mean, we could spend an entire segment just talking about guys who are listed out of position. Kevin McCullough is not Kansas's shooting guard. He's just not. He's a small forward. And like, I would rather put Carter on this list and move McCullough down to the small forward position. You could bump Anton Watson to the power forward spot because he doesn't play small forward either. It's just kind of the way that it works. Positionless basketball has made these lists a little bit harder to pin down. But to me, Carter in particular really stands out as a guy who should have been on this list.
Dude, Carter has 25 points in 4 of their last 7 games.
Yeah, ridiculous.
What are we doing? KJ Simpson from Colorado, man. I love what this dude has been doing. I know Colorado hasn't necessarily done as much as they wanted to this year, but he's been a little bit of a do-it-all for them, especially as the Buffs were dealing with some injuries to Cody Williams and Tristan Da Silva. But great stuff from KJ Simpson. Love to see what he's doing.
Julius Erving Award top 10. We got Jamison Battle from Ohio State, Keon Brooks from Washington, Tucker DeVries from Drake. Nice to see some mid-major representation there. Harrison Ingram at North Carolina, David Jones and Dylan Jones from Memphis and Weber State, respectively. Dalton Connect, of course, having a monster season for Tennessee. Baylor Shireman, another representative from Creighton. Jalen Tyson, who we mentioned earlier, from Cal, and then Anton Watson, apparently the small forward for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Isaac, a couple of guys who stood out to me who didn't make this list. AJ Storr from Wisconsin, Cam Spencer from UConn, both feel like guys who should have been here.
100%, man. I love what a revelation Cam Spencer has been for UConn coming over. Initially had played 3 years at Loyola and then last year at Rutgers. But dude, shooting 43% right now from 3 on 6 attempts a game. Andy, it's, you know, when we think UConn, I think we think the bookends of, you know, specifically Tristan UConn Newton and Donovan Clingan. But man, Cam Spencer is this gritty, edgy dude who can just absolutely shoot the lights out. He's not backing down from a fight. And I think he is the guy that maybe more than anybody inhabits Danny Hurley himself on the floor.
Yeah. And Storr's a guy who stands out. He's kind of that missing piece. It's a much smaller scale of the addition of Dalton Connect at Tennessee, but Wisconsin needed a guy, more of a bucket getter, a floor spacer, a guy who could really score for them in ways to kind of help elevate that offense. And he has brought that. St. John's transfer comes over to Wisconsin and has really been a key part of this team's emergence as a top 10, top 15, you know, real challenger for Purdue in the Big Ten. And I thought he should have gotten some flowers here.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we think about this Wisconsin team is not your grandma's Wisconsin, not your Bo Ryan Wisconsin team.
Yep.
Their offense is better efficiency-wise than their defense is this year. Andy, Karl Malone Ward, top 10 power forwards. We got Kyle Filipowski from Duke, Enrique Freeman from Akron. I said Freeman, super weird there. Deron Holmes, 2 from Dayton. Oso Ighodaro from Marquette. Graham Ike from Gonzaga. Kashad Johnson at Arizona. Boy, he's been big for them. Alex Alex Caravan from UConn, Jaden Ledee from San Diego State, Norchad Omir from Miami, and Grade Osborne from Utah State. Andy, I love this. You talked about mid-majors. This list, this power forward list, is peppered with them, and you love to see it. Once again, we have another little crew, although we picked out kind of 3 snubs on this one.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that there's a lot of mid-major love for the power forwards, but Drew Pember was a guy that I thought should have been in consideration here. He's having a monster season once again for Asheville. He's got that name recognition. People know who he is.
And the flow, man, that hair is beautiful.
Yeah, he's one that really stood out to me. There's also a couple of guys in the Big 12 that I thought could have gotten some consideration here. KJ Adams at Kansas. That whole Kansas starting lineup has been very good this year. We've talked about the issues at the shooting guard position. Johnny Furphy has kind of helped replicate that. And then Emmanuel Miller having a really good year for TCU. Again, we're talking about a ranked team consistently in the top 25, top 20 conversation, and Emmanuel Miller's their best player. And it's kind of surprising to see teams in that conversation when their best players aren't getting this kind of recognition.
And then, Andy, finally, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award for the center is not out yet. I believe it will actually come out today, Friday. But as we record this, it is not yet. But we went ahead and just listed some names that we thought might be on there. Zach Edey, he might make it. We'll have to wait.
I think probably.
No, and some other names we listed, just kind of people that popped up for us. Hunter Dickinson from Kansas, Ryan Kalkbrenner at Creighton, PJ Hall from Clemson, Janai Broom from Auburn, Joel Soriano from St. John, Stephen Crowell from Wisconsin, and Armando Baycott from the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah, I think Klingon is another name to keep in mind there, but he just hasn't played enough games.
Exactly. I think that
maybe on the outside there, but certainly one of the more talented centers in the league, just hasn't played enough to necessarily be in that conversation. Isaac, we got four top 10 matchups in one of the most electric college basketball regular season weekends that I can ever remember. And we're going to break down all of that upcoming matchups. But first, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all of you who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Right now, the San Francisco 49ers, 1.5-point favorites over Kansas City. But FanDuel has many different ways you can end the season with a W or 2 or 3, because not only can you bet on who's going to win Super Bowl 58, FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points are going to be scored, and so much more. So new customers, if you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Well, Isaac, we got 4 top 10 matchups, 8 of the top 10 teams in action against each other. 6 of those teams will be playing on Saturday, and then Purdue at Wisconsin on Sunday. We'll talk about that game in a second, but let's start with Saturday. Here is the action that we have for anybody who's, if the weather's getting a little bit sunnier, I know it is where I am, and it's like, oh, it might be a great weekend to go outside. No, not
that's
unless
the worst decision you could ever make.
It is going to be incredible hoops action. We got Houston at Kansas, number 4 versus number 8, 4 p.m. Eastern time. That game will be on ESPN. Houston is favored by 5. These are the Ken Pom predictions for this game. We also have Duke at Carolina, of course, one of the most epic rivalries in all of sports. Number 7 Duke at number 3 Carolina, 6:30 Eastern time for that one on ESPN. Will be right after that Houston and Kansas game. Carolina favored by 6 right now at Ken Pom. And then you have Tennessee at Kentucky, 5 at 10, 8 Eastern time, ESPN. Tennessee favored by 2. 3 straight games, all on ESPN. Big 12, ACC, SEC, incredible that this all lined up the way that it has for us to watch on Saturday. Isaac, where do you want to start this conversation with these 3 incredible matchups?
By saying congratulations to ESPN for having this lineup.
Right.
I love Virginia Clemson is the lead into this thing, so it better live up to billing for the worldwide leader. No, look, y'all, 8 of the top 10 teams are playing each other, like Andy said. Just appreciate what a special moment this is when you get this level. Not only do you get it, but it's back to back to back, and you literally never have to change the channel. It's phenomenal and incredible, and I can't wait. Andy, probably the biggest thing that jumps out to me is that these Ken Palm lines twice have the team favored that I didn't think would be, and that's Houston by 5 at Kansas and Tennessee by 2 at Kentucky. Andy, let me ask you this. Why do you think the Ken Palm line has Houston favored in Phog Allen Fieldhouse?
Because Kansas has looked vulnerable, I guess, is the best answer I can say. I mean, two things. One, Kansas has looked vulnerable. Two, Houston has like one of the best defenses that anybody has ever seen.
God has ever created.
Right. It is absolutely unbelievable. There was an incredible article at Hoop Vision. Jordan Sperber wrote about Houston's defense and the movement that they use and how they are as efficient and effective as they are. And it is just extraordinary what this team is capable of doing. Kansas, though, does have a very good offense. They are very well coached, of course. We've talked about that quite a bit. And I think they represent some matchup issues for Houston. They have that size in the front court that, I mean, ultimately, as much as you can use phenomenal defense, Hunter Dickinson's still really big and he's still really strong and he's still really capable of scoring.
Hunter Dickinson didn't yet shrink? Is that what you're telling me?
He's still the same height as far as I know. I don't think Kelvin Sampson has figured out that yet. If he can, I imagine that he will. And there'll be a whole bunch of people in the state of Michigan quite happy to see that happen. But to me, I understand why Houston is favored. 5 feels like a fairly big line, and I'll be curious what FanDuel's lines look like when they come out. Yep. I suspect it won't be Houston by 5. Phog Allen Fieldhouse is still a place that the Jayhawks dominate, but this is going to be a really fascinating matchup. And I think it's a game where I'm curious if Kansas will get they'll need some extra performances from some of those guys to step up. You know, Elmarco Jackson and Nick Timberlake played well in their recent game. And I think that that's something that, you know, it was against Oklahoma State. Can they do it against Houston? And if not, do they have enough horses? Those are two very different basketball. Right. Do they have enough horses to win this thing with only 4 or 5 players doing damage offensively? I don't know.
Yeah, Johnny Furphy to me is going to be maybe the X factor for this entire game, Andy, to see like, hey, he's been doing it recently. And I love that for Bill Self finding a 5th true starter that can contribute. But can he do it against this offense or this Houston defense that you talked about? Andy, Duke, Carolina.
Yeah.
Always. It's so good. The biggest thing I'm watching for in this game is one of the things you and I have talked about multiple times this year is that Duke doesn't play a true center. Kyle Filipowski is their center.
Yeah.
Despite being on the Karl Malone list, he is their starting 5. So he and Armando Bacot will be guarding each other. There are going to be advantages and disadvantages on both sides of the court for both teams. Which team is able to navigate that matchup better may well find themselves waking up Sunday morning with a big smile on their face.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, pulling Bacot away from the rim and making him defend in space is an advantage potentially for Duke, especially with Filipowski's ability to shoot the 3 and also distribute the basketball. If Carolina tries to double him, like he's a huge X factor in all of Duke's games, but really, especially in this one. But on the same time, can Filipowski defend Bacot on the block? Can he avoid getting in foul trouble, which could be a big problem for Duke?
And that's been a storyline for him lately.
Yeah, exactly. If Bacot can get him 2 fouls in the first 10 minutes of the game, I mean, that changes the complexion of this thing in a huge way. So that's the huge storyline. That's the big matchup in that one. Obviously, there's going to be some really fun guard play with Jeremy Roach and with Jared McCain and, of course, with RJ Davis. It's going to be a fantastic matchup at every position. It always is between these two teams, but I'm really excited to see how it plays out in the front court.
Hey, Andy, you know what happened on Tuesday night and Wednesday night in the SEC?
No, tell me.
2 top 10 teams lost on the road. Their names were Tennessee and Kentucky, and now they play each other in Rupp Arena. Which team is going to bounce back better? Who responds well? Can Tennessee handle the fire of Rupp? Can Kentucky find their way back? Will we see, as of right now, DJ Wagner and Justin Edwards did not play in Kentucky's loss on Wednesday night. We don't know their status as of right now. Will they be back? Can Dalton Connect continue to be on fire? I mean, there's just so many great storylines in this one too.
I don't think I'm going to answer all of those.
I know. I'm just like, stream of consciousness.
I'll tell you this. I think Tennessee's going to win. I think Dalton Connect's going to go off for 30 plus. Kentucky's defense is just not good.
Yeah.
And they've improved in some ways, but they've shown to be they struggle when they get slowed down. I think Tennessee's capable of slowing them down. I think Tennessee has enough offensive firepower to win this one in a slowed down game, even against Kentucky's very solid offense. So to me, I think Tennessee's going to go into Rupp Arena and pick up a W, and it's going to put Calipari and that team feeling the strain in a fairly big way with some early losses here in February and late January.
Man, crazy. Andy, let's turn the page to Sunday and this Big Ten battle. Now, full disclosure, Wisconsin plays on Thursday night. We are recording this before the end of that game. Wisconsin's at Nebraska. So assuming the Badgers take care of business there, Andy, Purdue at Wisconsin, trying to get Purdue, still one game behind Wisconsin in the loss column, trying to get there. This game is at 1 Eastern on CBS. Boilermakers -1 in Madison.
Yeah, this is the toughest game for Purdue in the Big Ten in my mind. I think Madison's a tough place to play. It is going to be an electric atmosphere on Sunday. I think Wisconsin has some size that they can counteract Edey with, as well as somebody can counteract Edey. It's not exactly easy to do.
Storr's not exactly easy to do. I think you meant to say.
Storr's going to have a good game for Wisconsin, no doubt. Crowell obviously is going to be a huge factor on both ends of the floor. I think Wisconsin's absolutely capable of winning this game. I don't know that I would predict that. I think Purdue is probably going to win. I think they're just so talented. They're so deep. Lance Jones represents a matchup issue for Wisconsin in some ways. If Lawyer and Braden Smith can play as consistently as they have, I'm not sure Wisconsin's got enough firepower to answer, especially with their defense being kind of subpar this year. But this is going to be a really fun one. And I think it's a spot that makes Purdue a little bit more vulnerable than we've seen from them for most of the season.
And I would push back slightly on calling Wisconsin's defense subpar. I think it's just more for me in relation to their offense being better than typical. I think they will have some things there, but that is certainly going to play a factor. And Braden Smith, he's clearly going to be upset about being a little snubbed. Right. I'm just kidding. But oh man, great game. I cannot wait to get home from church, settle in, and dig in on this game. Andy, UConn, the number 1 team in the AP poll, number 2 team in our poll, heads on the road to take on Rick Pitino and the Johnnies on Saturday. Could the Huskies be on upset watch? We'll talk about it right after this. All right, Andy, not only do we have these 4 top 10 matchups this weekend, we have another top 20 matchup, Iowa State at Baylor. We'll get to that in a minute. But one of the main, this just continues to be a theme this season, is ranked teams on the road at unranked teams, and they are dropping like flies when this happens. In fact, if I remember the number right that I saw earlier this week, and this is off the top of my head, so it could be very wrong. Please, someone fact check me. Top 10 teams on the road this year are under 500. Andy, that's crazy.
44% was a stat that I saw.
Yeah. Okay.
Not making up, but also might not be 100% accurate.
Well, we both can't be stupid, right? So surely there's a thing. Well, the game in question then is number 1 UConn at St. John's, noon Saturday on Fox. Huskies favored by 4. Is Rick Pitino got some magic in this one, Andy?
Yeah, it feels like Pitino and the Johnnies have continued to lose really close games in conference play. Like they're 6 or 8 points away from having 3 more wins in the Big East, which is the kind of difference that puts them on the bubble or even into the field of 68. Whereas right now they're kind of on the outside looking in. I think that Pitino absolutely has some magic. He's a phenomenal coach. He's ready for this matchup. His team is talented. They're deep. They have a lot of different things they can throw at you. Having said all of that, I still think UConn is going to win. I think it is going to be a close game. I think a 4-point line is like pretty accurate, pretty on the nose. Like I think this could come down to 1 or 2 different possessions, as it was in the Duke Carolina game. It's going to come down to the front court. Joel Soriano versus Donovan Clingan is a matchup. It's going to be a really, really fun one to see how those 2 guys go at each other. I think another big key for St. John's is going to be Chris Ledlum. He's a really great rebounding forward. Can he kind of be disruptive with Alex Caravan and the rest of UConn's front court and kind of make some matchup problems for UConn? Because if so, I think St. John's is capable of winning this one, but I still think UConn, they've showed their resolve a lot of times this year, and I think they'll do it again.
Andy, 2 other ranked teams on the road that we want to mention on Saturday. Mountain West, dude, is just so much fun. Utah State, number 17, is at San Diego State, 3:30 on Fox. That'll probably is the very next game after UConn St. John's. Andy, San Diego State favored by 4 at home. Aggie's going to be interesting there. The other one, Auburn, number 16 at Ole Miss, 6 Eastern on SEC Network. Tigers favored by 6. Andy, what do you think about either or both of these games?
We'll start with the Mountain West. Utah State continues to avoid losses. They have been so good at continuing to win. They win close games. San Diego State at home is a really tough place to play. I like this matchup a lot. I like the dynamics of it. I think these are two fun teams stylistically to go up against each other. I think that's going to be a really fun kind of rock fight style basketball game. But I think a lot more people are going to be paying attention to Auburn because they've had this really tough couple of games. And how do they respond to that? How do they respond going on the road, taking on the Rebels, taking on Chris Beard's team? And they lost to Alabama. They had that loss to Mississippi State. They had the huge win over Vanderbilt, but who hasn't gotten themselves a huge win over Vanderbilt at some point this year? So I'm really interested to see how Bruce Pearl's team responds, because I think this game is going to kind of give us a good barometer for if this Auburn team can truly bounce back and contend at the top of the SEC, or if they're more likely to keep kind of taking these losses to good but not great teams and potentially finishing, instead of finishing third or even second or first, finishing more like fifth. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like they had as good of a year as many thought that they were going to.
Yeah, right now they and South Carolina are tied 1 game back of Bama in the SEC standings.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, what's interesting is a couple weeks ago on Saturday, Auburn was at home versus Ole Miss, then Wednesday on the road at Bama. This week is literally the flip. Saturday at Ole Miss, Wednesday versus Bama. Critical week for the Tigers. Andy, we've got 3 other ranked matchups we want to mention, and then a big fat West Coast Conference rivalry game. Texas at TCU, 2 Eastern on ESPN2. Horned Frogs -5. Our top 20 matchup that we referenced, number 12, Iowa State. The Cyclones going down to Waco, number 18, Baylor, ESPN2. That game is at 8 o'clock, Baylor -3. And then that Bama team we just mentioned, Mississippi State, is traveling to Tuscaloosa, 8:30 on SEC Network. Crimson Tide -9, Mr. Patton.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun matchups here. Big 12 always is going to have your top ranked games. I'm really curious how Texas does on the road against the Horned Frogs. I think that's going to be a really intriguing matchup. I think Texas TCU is probably going to win, but Texas has certainly played spoiler a handful of times already this year. And Iowa State Baylor, I think, gives you a good indication of who's kind of in the driver's seat for potentially finishing third, fourth in the Big 12. Iowa State has been the better team. They've played better than Baylor for the majority of the season. Baylor has been far less consistent. I could see Iowa State's defense really disrupting Baylor offensively in this contest, even on the road against the Bears. And I think I'm going to lean TCU and Iowa State taking the victories here, but 2 really fun Big 12 matchups.
Yeah, very much so. And then obviously that Bama team, man, they reeled off Wednesday night. It was like a 38-17 run to come back and beat Georgia. Can they do that at home again? Andy, it obviously makes sense for me to ask you, what do you make of this? Like, listen, early this season, we all ruled out St. Mary's. They were 3-5, and they have been on an absolute roll since then. They traveled to Spokane this weekend to play Gonzaga for Unite Owls. Man, this is your game, 10:30 Eastern on ESPN. Just this ESPN lineup, dude, on Saturday is insane. Wait, good grief. Anyway, Zags -5, Andy. What's going to happen?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned how insane this slate is. I think if you had told ESPN that they would have 3 top 10 ranked games on this Saturday, they might have believed you. But if you told them the other 2 games were unranked, I don't know that they'd have bought it. I don't know that they'd have bought Gonzaga and St. Mary's both being unranked, and Virginia and Clemson both being unranked.
That is, and those are the bookends. Yeah,
the bookends. It's a really, really fun slate on Saturday. For this game, Gales have rattled off 13 of their last 14. A big part of it has been the play of Augustus Marcelonis. He was kind of the replacement for Logan Johnson at the shooting guard position. Really, really struggled early in the year. Was like sub 20% from 3.
That was the issue to me, dude. Like,
he was not an offensive threat. He didn't step into that role the way that they needed him to. Lately, he's been better than Aiden Mahaney in their last 15 games. I mean, he's averaging like 20 point or 16.7 assists in the last 10 or so games. Like, he's been an absolute monster for them. And I think between him with Mahaney still showing some inconsistency issues, kind of having a bit of a sophomore slump, but Joshua Jefferson, another sophomore for them, has stepped up in a big way. And of course, for Gonzaga, Anton Watson has been a monster this year. And in games like this, in games where Graham Ike sometimes can get neutralized by good front court players like he did against UCLA, like he did against Santa Clara, in those 2 games, Watson scored 30-plus points. If Anton Watson can score 30 for Gonzaga and can be that absolute scoring machine, I think St. Mary's can match up well with Ike, but I'm not sure how well they match up against Watson. And if he can have a big game, if Nolan Hickman can play like the pissed off Nolan Hickman that we saw on Tuesday against LMU, where he scored 24 points on 10 of 15 shooting, if that version of Nolan Hickman shows up and Anton Watson has a good game, the Zags win. If not, the Gales potentially build themselves a 2-game lead in the WCC, and we start to have real concerns about whether Gonzaga can win in Vegas. And if not, if they might find themselves outside the NCAA tournament for the first time since George W. Bush was the president.
And then the final game we want to mention is Virginia at Clemson. My word, Virginia, just like St. Mary's, has very much turned a corner. They are now 7-3 in the ACC. Andy, they've won 5 in a row, including 2 road games, albeit at Georgia Tech and Louisville, although Georgia Tech would have something to say to Duke and North Carolina about going down to Atlanta. So, yeah, look, that's a good win for Virginia. This is, to me, a really critical and interesting ACC matchup that's going to kind of be earlier in the day on ESPN.
Yeah, it feels like a bubble game. We haven't gotten quite into all the bubble talk yet. We will. We're planning to
bubbles. Well,
we're planning to get very bubbly with some of these games, and this one feels like one where both these teams haven't quite performed up to expectations all year long. They've been playing better as of late. Whoever gets a W here, I think, finds themselves in a more favorable position. But you don't want to be in a favorable position in early February. You want to be in a favorable position in mid-March. Right. So both these teams still got plenty of opportunities. If whoever loses has still got chances, but this feels like it's going to be a big one in that regard.
Whew, what a weekend, man. I cannot wait.
A weekend, right? That's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. I am so excited to watch college basketball all day on Saturday. We got some great games on Sunday as well, some solid games on Friday as well. There's always good college basketball on, but this Saturday is going to be unbelievable. Folks, if you want to join us and chat with us throughout these games on Saturday, don't forget to join our Discord channel. There is a link in the show notes on audio and video platform. It is a free platform to join us where we're chatting about all of these games all day long. Once again, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. Plenty of them in action this weekend. And until Monday, when we get to recap this incredible weekend of games, peace out.